Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another video. Thought we'd do a talking rubbish transfer show today. There's been a couple of transfer rumours over the last 24 to 48 hours or so that I thought, you know what, we'll sit down just in a video format, a little bit chilled out, and we'll just have a little bit of a conversation about them. Now myself and Tom sat down on Monday night, of course, no game review to discuss as Everton's Premier League game against Aston Villa was postponed last weekend. Everton now not in action until this Sunday, coming up against Sheffield Wednesday in the FA Cup, 8 o'clock kickoff. So it feels like absolutely ages since we last watched Everton. It feels like absolutely ages since we've last talked about a performance. It's mad. It really is mad because everybody else in the Premier League is playing. Everybody else in the other leagues are playing. So this week has sort of weirdly felt like Everton just aren't there anymore, and it's mad because usually when your team isn't playing, be it Everton, there's other sides that aren't playing as well, whether it's an international break or a cup weekend. There's usually other teams that you're looking at and you're thinking, oh, okay, they haven't played for a while either, but it just seems at the moment like everybody's playing except Everton. It's been a really weird week or so, and I actually can't wait till Sunday because I just can't wait to watch Carlo Ancelotti's Everton again. But I thought, you know what, we'll sit down and we'll do a little talking rubbish transfer show. It's probably not going to be very long because there hasn't been a lot of transfer rumours, but there has been a couple that I want to sit down specifically and talk about. Myself and Tom, like I said, sat down a couple of days ago and we spoke about transfers and who Everton should really be looking at bringing in and who Everton should be looking at adding to the squad in order to be a side that are challenging for Premier League titles, a side that are challenging for Champions League places, because obviously Roy Keane had come out on Sky Sports on Sunday night and said that, Everton aren't a competitor of the league. They're not going to be up there come the end of the season. And I feel like a lot of Evertonians thought that was a fair point for Roy Keane to make. But the fact that he went on to talk about Leicester being there, and at the time, Leicester were only a couple of points ahead of Everton. Now, obviously, they've played about 14 times. So they're top of the league, I believe, now until, the second in the league, sorry, they were top of the league until last night's fixtures. So we sat down and we basically talked about who Everton should be looking at bringing in terms of maybe some players that aren't really on the radar at the moment, some players that aren't being spoken about but could come in and have an instant impact on improving Everton. But we didn't really mention the rumours that are currently going on because, obviously it's January transfer window. Whenever there's a transfer window, there's always rumours left, right and centre for certain players being linked with moves to the football club, and it's been a relatively quiet one for Everton, and it usually is a relatively quiet one in the January window because pretty much from the off, the club, or Marcel Brands in this case, come out and say, look, we're not really looking to do much business. We're not actively looking to go out and sign players. If an opportunity arises, then yes, we might take it, but we're not really actively out there to bring players in. He actually said in last week's AGM that we'll be focusing more on moving players on for, their next stage of their career rather than bringing players in. So, when your director of football is coming out and saying that, you don't really get many transfer rumours, certainly not linking players with moves to the football club. But there has been one that's been occurring recently and constantly occurring and keeps popping up despite Marcel Brands' comments. So we're going to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about a possible outgoing as well, which is very possible ultimately because Marcel Brands did say that we're looking at moving players on for the next stage of their career this January transfer window. So listen, we'll get straight into it then. Without further ado, we'll get straight into the rumours. This one is linking Bernard with a move away from Everton Football Club. Bernard, of course, has had a tough time. I think it's fair to say, since joining Everton in 2018. He come in and we were all very excited. He was this flair player. He had a lot of pace. He had the skill. He had the ability to beat players. And he was the sort of type of player that we hadn't really seen at Everton for a long time. A tricky winger who's got all of the ability in the world and, can beat players and can create opportunities. But it hasn't quite worked for Bernard in the 3 years that he's been at Everton Football Club so far. I believe his contract expires next summer. And ultimately, or this summer coming up, and ultimately, like I said, there's, I like Bernard. I think he's a really decent bloke. I think he comes across as a decent bloke, and I think he's a decent footballer, but he's just not consistent enough for what Everton are at the moment, or what Everton want to be. Coming off the bench as a squad player, yes, maybe, but, at his age and considering the amount of money that he's on per week, I think he may still be our highest earner, if not definitely up there with our top 3 highest earners. Not really, getting your worth for the money, to be perfectly honest with you. Like I said, Bernard on his day is very, very good. We saw his impact, very recently come on against Sheffield United a couple of weeks ago on Boxing Day, and he was absolutely brilliant. He changed that game. He come on, he added a little bit of flair to the side. He was creative. He created the opportunity for Gylfi Sigurdsson's winner. He also started against Manchester United a few weeks before, and he scored the opening goal in that game. But far too many times we've seen Bernard sort of come off the bench and not really have an impact, or even start games and not really have an impact. So this rumour comes from Alan Myers, who obviously has got, quite good direct links with Everton Football Club, does work for Sky Sports, or reports for Sky Sports, and he has said that Dubai-based club Al Nasr are keen to sign Bernard on a permanent transfer before the end of this window, and they are considering a £10 million bid for the player. Now, I think this is a fantastic deal if we can get it over the line. I think it works for all parties. It ultimately allows the player to go and play in a league where he's probably going to have a little bit more freedom. It won't be as physically demanding as the Premier League. I think that's something that Bernard ultimately has struggled with since being, at Everton in the Premier League, as he's got the flair, he's got the quality, he's got the skill, but he can be found out very, very easily. And teams that we're coming up against find them out by ultimately realising that he probably hasn't got the strength for the Premier League. So if you can sort of stand on him and not allow him any real space and not allow him any real time to turn, then you can pretty much nullify his strengths. And ultimately, I think that's been a big downfall for Bernard in the Premier League, is the fact that it is a very fast-paced league. So okay, it's not like he's got the run on a lot of fullbacks. There's a lot of fast fullbacks in this league. There's a lot of attacking, thinking fullbacks in this league as well. But also the strength and the physicality of the league, I just don't think matches Bernard. Whereas if he was going over to, the Dubai league, I think he'd do absolutely fantastically over there. His flair, his quality, his ability, his pace, I think he'd be a level above, the average sort of level of player that they've got in that league. And that's not disrespecting that league whatsoever. I know, it's a league that are trying to build their way up and trying to constantly improve, which I've got a lot of respect for. But I think Bernard could do really, really well over there. Like I said, it works for the player. Ultimately, he'll be getting more game time. He'll be constantly playing. He'll be playing week in, week out. He won't be on the bench. He won't be coming on for the last 10-15 minutes of games, and he's probably going to be on more money than he is at Everton as well. Obviously going over to a league like the Dubai League, he's probably not going to drop his wages. In fact, he may even get a pay rise to go over there, which, Bernard's looking at his options come the end of the season, and he's thinking, right, okay, I want to leave Everton because I'm not getting enough opportunities here. He's been linked with a number of teams very recently, Roma being one of them, of course, because his former manager, Paulo Fonseca, who managed him at Shakhtar, manages him at Roma, and I believe that, Bernard's agent and Paulo Fonseca have had some conversations, but I highly doubt that Roma would be willing to pay him £150,000 per week to come in to them, whereas Al Nassr might very well be happy to do that, if not more. So I think it's a move that really, really works for the player. Look, it's a move that works for Everton ultimately, and I think it will be a fantastic deal if it went through. Like I said, considering he's coming up to the last year of his contract, I think he might be in the last year of his contract at the moment. His age is, he's 28 years old. He's shown in the last 3 years that he just hasn't got the consistency for this league. And look, you could sit there and you could say, well, Cam, you sat here and done an hour live stream yesterday talking about players that have improved under Carlo Ancelotti, who, we may have all thought at one point weren't going to improve, the likes of Alex Iwobi, Michael Keane, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So is there not an opportunity for Bernard to improve? The argument's there, and there is a potential opportunity for Bernard to come in and improve, but the reality of the situation is those players that have improved very recently, like I've just mentioned, have all had their game time. Michael Keane's, played pretty much every game of football for Everton since the lockdown period when football returned back in June last year. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's been consistently playing for over a year now. Okay, Alex Iwobi maybe hasn't had as much consistency, but certainly recently he's been in, week out. Bernard isn't getting that, and Bernard isn't likely to get that either, because he plays in a position in which one of our best players plays in as well, in Richarlison over on that left-hand side. And like I said, I think the inconsistency of Bernard ultimately is a massive downfall for him, because 1 minute you can bring him off the bench and he can change the game and he can be absolutely brilliant. The next game you can bring him off the bench and he just passengers it and he doesn't do anything. So I think that would be a fantastic move for the football club. Ultimately, £10 million for a player who's who's in the last year of his contract, who hasn't shown enough consistency, or even when he's given the chance and he's playing well. He does well, and he's a very creative player, but he just looks void of any confidence, really. He looks like he doesn't want to beat players, he doesn't want to take players on, he always just wants to play the safe option. And like I said, ultimately it's £125,000 a week upwards off the wage bill, and that's absolutely massive. Marcel Brands sat down at last week's AGM and spoke about the fact that since he's joined the football club in the 2 years that he's been here, he's managed to reduce the size of the squad in terms of numbers from 40 players to 27 players, and he's also increased the worth of the squad as well. And ultimately, going forward as a football club, if Everton are looking to bring in better players and bring in players that are going to solidify us as Champions League contenders, or who knows, in a couple of years challenging for the Premier League title, then we could do with having that £125,000 being spent on a player that we know is going to come in and make an instant impact. Not somebody that might come in one day and make an impact, but then on another day mightn't do anything. We need to be spending that money on somebody that we know is going to come in. For example, James Rodriguez is probably on around about the same amount of money as Bernard. Might be on a little bit more, but he's probably on around about that figure. And we know when he comes in, he makes the impact. He's creative. He's playing balls to Luca Dean. He's playing balls to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He's making impacts on Premier League games of football consistently. Dom will be on less than Bernard. Richarlison will be on less than Bernard, and they're having an impact constantly. Michael Keane's probably on less than Bernard, and he's coming in and he's having an impact. So we can also reinvest that money back into the squad then. And that £125,000 a week, or it might even be more, £150,000 a week, that mightn't go on one specific player. That might be split £75,000 a week into two players, for example, who come in and can make an impact on the bench, or even off the bench, or even come in and are starters in this squad. It's about ultimately managing your money, and especially with financial fair play at the moment. And if Everton really want to take that step to the next level, we can't have sort of fringe players who are inconsistent and alright as our highest earners. Those players should be, like on the wages that reflect those types of performances. If we want to step forward as a club, then for me, the players with no future at the football club that are on such a high wage simply need to leave. So I actually think this deal makes a lot of sense for everybody. Like I said, it is coming from Alan Myers, it is coming from Sky Sport. I think we'll see Bernard leave Everton Football Club very, very soon. Now, obviously, there's only, just over a week or so, 10 days until the end of the transfer window. It might be about 11 days until the end of the transfer window. So whether it'll be in this month, I don't know. If not, it'll definitely be in the summer. But if we can get a fee of £10 million for Bernard, ultimately, we've made a profit, because let's not forget, he come in for nothing. We signed him for nothing. He come in on a massive wage, but he didn't have a transfer fee because he was at the end of his contract at Shakhtar Donetsk. So ultimately, if we can bring him into the football, if we can, move him on from the football club and make £10 million profit from him, and like I said, get rid of that high wage on the wage book, then I think that could be a massive positive. So in terms of a ranking, obviously, if you're new to the Talking Rubbish transfer show, what we do is we go through every rumour that's been put out there in recent times, and we basically rank them, either make it happen, which means get it done, obviously, possibly, which means there's a potential of it happening, or complete rubbish, which means we don't believe the rumour whatsoever. So with the Bernard one, I'm going to go with make it happen. I think it's just a fantastic deal for all parties, really, isn't it? It's a little bit like a deal that I'm going to talk about in a moment that's already happened, but on a grander scale, ultimately. It's better for the player. He's going to go out. He's going to get a lot more game time. He's probably going to be a lot more comfortable and find it a lot easier in that league as well. It's brilliant for Everton because we're getting, £10 million profit from a player who ultimately hasn't been fantastic since he's come here, has had his good moments and his bad moments, and we're taking that £125,000 plus a week. We're taking that away and investing it back into the squad, and investing it on players that we know are going to come in and have an impact, or maybe investing it on some of the players that are currently at the football club, giving them a bit of a pay rise, because ultimately Farhad Moshiri has had to inject another £250+ million into this football club, and he's not going to have an endless pot of money to just keep injecting. So we've mentioned it before, football is a business, and even if we absolutely love Bernard, this would probably make a lot of sense. And like I said, I've got nothing against Bernard. I think as a person, he's a decent bloke, and I think he's a player, he's alright, but that's pretty much it. He's alright, he's not spectacular, and he's certainly not, £125,000 a week spectacular. So I think this deal works for everybody. So I'm saying make it happen. Will it happen or not? I think we'll see Bernard leave Everton Football Club because I don't think he's happy himself. I think he wants a lot more game time. Whether the interest from Al Nassr is strong or not, we don't know, but I suppose we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, that is the latest on the Bernard rumours. Moving on now then to another player Everton have been linked with. Like I said, with Marcel Brands' comments in last week's AGM, it's made it pretty much apparent to everybody that Everton aren't prioritising bringing players in this January transfer window. And that is something that I think we all assumed anyway, and we all understood anyway. Maybe it's a little bit frustrating because, you look at the squad and you think we do need a lot more quality. We do need to inject more quality. For example, up front, we could do with another backup for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Obviously, Ellis Sims went out on loan to Blackpool. We're going to talk about that one in a moment because I think it's really, really interesting. But this is a player that we've been linked with now for about a week or so. It is Joshua Zirkzee of Bayern Munich, young 19-year-old Dutch striker. He was first linked with Everton on Friday of last week when TalkSport revealed that Everton were in advanced talks, according to their sources, to bring the player in on loan. Fabrizio Romano then said that Everton are amongst a number of clubs in talks with him to potentially bring him in on a loan deal, and this sparked obviously a lot of conversation. It sparked a lot of discussion. Ellis Sims's loan a couple of days ago sort of helped reignite this conversation for Joshua Zirkzee, even after Marcel Brands saying that we're not prioritising bringing players in, because ultimately, we now have Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Cenk Tosun as our two striking options, and as of now anyway, we would like to hope that Dom has returned to fitness in the week or so that we haven't played, and that he hasn't played. But as of now, as far as we're aware, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is still suffering from a hamstring injury and may even miss Sunday's game against Sheffield Wednesday, and we won't know any more on that until Carlo Ancelotti's press conference tomorrow afternoon. So again, to say that we're currently left with just Dom and Cenk Tosun is leaving us a little bit light, but I also understand where Marcel Brands is coming from and saying, look, this isn't really the window to be doing business. But again, bringing in somebody on loan is very feasible. I could see it happening, and the Joshua Zirkzee rumours have come out of nowhere, really. Like I said, TalkSport put out saying that their sources have said that Everton are in advanced talks. Fabrizio Romano mentioned it as well. Since then, Sky Germany have said that Everton are in talks over the transfer of 19-year-old Dutch striker Joshua Zirkzee. However, Alan Myers did put out a tweet quoting that, saying that sources in Germany have stated that Everton are in talks with Bayern Munich over the player, and he said that he believes from Everton sources that we are not interested. He said Everton's officials have dismissed any interest in Joshua Zirkzee. Now, I don't know if this is just Everton officials coming out and saying, yeah, let's just say we're not interested, and it's one of them that's going to happen, and we're going to all be sitting here saying, oh yeah, they fooled us, or whether we're genuinely not interested in bringing the player in. It does confuse me a little bit, because there is a few journalists that have talked about the Joshua Zirkzee rumours that usually are very, very spot on. Fabrizio Romano being the big one in him coming out saying that Everton are amongst a couple of clubs who are in talks with Bayern Munich for the player. Joshua Zirkzee has played in an Everton kit before, never signed for Everton officially, but he did have a trial for us a couple of years ago, and I think he played in a tournament and he played for Everton there, but then he decided to go on and sign for Bayern Munich, and you can't really blame him. But like I said, it's a really, really strange one. Pipi Sierra, who is a journalist who I became familiar with during the James Rodriguez negotiations as well. He had a big part to play in the James Rodriguez negotiations. And he was actually one of the first journalists to mention that there was a little bit of a stalling in the James situation, and it turned out that there was a stalling in the James situation, but it was only over something small, and then obviously he went on and signed. So Pipe Sierra was somebody that in the summer I followed quite closely because of his links with the James Rodriguez stuff, and then he did come out, to be fair, pretty much before anybody else and say, yeah, everything's all sorted, it's good to go. He has said that talks between Everton and Bayern for the transfer of Joshua Zirkzee have advanced. Everton have offered a loan deal with a fee of £3 million and an obligation to buy for £10 million. Bayern Munich are asking for more. Now, it's important to understand that in Fabrizio Romano's tweet earlier on this week about Zirkzee, he mentioned that there was a number of clubs, I think Parma were one that were interested, and that the player was prioritising playing football. football and game time. He obviously isn't getting an awful lot of game time at Bayern Munich at the moment, and ultimately, listen, if he come to Everton, yes, he'd get game time, but it would be probably off the bench. It would maybe be in the cup competitions. It would maybe be in a midweek game to give Dominic Calvert-Lewin a rest. He wouldn't be the number one striker, and if that's what Joshua Zirkzee ultimately wants as a player, if he wants to go out and be the number one, if he wants to play week in, week out for a club, then Everton probably isn't the best club for him to go to. Maybe he'll be able to do that at Parma, because ultimately, look, like I said, with Everton, having Dominic Calvert-Lewin as our number one striker, and rightly so, he's been absolutely fantastic this season. Anybody that comes in to as a striker isn't going to start week in, week out. They have to come in with the understanding that for the moment they're going to be back up and that they have to fight their way into the team. And this is the the big thing with modern day football transfers, is that players are coming into football clubs understanding that they have to fight for their position, that they have to fight to get into the side, and some players don't like that. Some players want to come in, sign on the dotted line and be guaranteed that they're going to be playing week in, week out. They don't want to be told, well, look, for the first few weeks you're on the bench because Dom's been in absolutely brilliant form, so you've got to prove to me in training that you're good enough to get in this team. Some players will like that, some players just don't like that at all. They want to be guaranteed game time, and not saying Joshua Zirkzee wouldn't fight to get his way into the team, but the fact that he's come out and he's saying he's seeking a move away from Bayern temporarily because he wants game time makes me think that Everton probably isn't the greatest suited club to him because of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and how good Dom is, and ultimately the fact that Dom will be playing week in, week out. But it is interesting because there have been a lot of journalists, there's been a lot of rumours regarding Zirkzee and his future and where he'll end up, and will he potentially end up playing for Everton? And like I said, obviously the Ellis Sims situation with him going out on loan to Blackpool does leave us in a bit of a conundrum, really. We saw last week against Wolves, which is a fantastic win, by the way, and tactically just an absolute masterclass by Carlo Ancelotti. But ultimately we saw, the danger of not having a fit striker. Dominic Calvert-Lewin had picked up a hamstring injury, which Carlo had confirmed. Cenk Tosun wasn't, fit to play because he'd played 120 minutes in the cup game a few days before. So ultimately, that left us having to play Gylfi Sigurdsson as a false nine. And whilst that game plan itself worked with having Ben Godfrey at left back and Luca Dean at left wing and Alex Iwobi on the right hand side, whilst that worked, Gylfi Sigurdsson wasn't great at all, was he? And I don't blame him for that. I've said it openly. I've said it in the last couple of streams. I don't blame Gylfi Sigurdsson for not having a brilliant game the other day against Wolves because he's not a striker. He worked hard. Yes, he didn't run behind players. Yes, he didn't, he wasn't an aerial threat. Yes, he didn't make those runs in behind. But he's not a striker, so he was never going to do that. So I don't necessarily blame him, but it just shows that, with the lack of fitness that Cenk Tosun seems to have at the moment, because obviously he was completely ruled out of that game against Wolves, even though he'd played a couple of days before, which, is understandable, but realistically, for example, Everton play on Sunday, and then we play on Wednesday against Leicester. Massive game on Wednesday back in the Premier League against Leicester. So if Dominic Calvert-Lewin is still, suffering from that hamstring injury, which hopefully he's not, then what's Cenk Tosun going to do? Play 90 minutes on Sunday and then, turn up on Wednesday and say, I can't play, I'm not fit to play, and then we've got to play with a false nine against Leicester as well. It's not ideal, is it? So for me, ideally, Everton could do with having another striker. Now, I understand we don't want to buy because teams are going to understand that. That's how the January transfer window works. Teams will look at Everton and go, well, hang on, they're desperate for a striker. They've loaned Moise Kean out to PSG, who looks like he could potentially be staying. Ellis Sims has gone out now for the rest of the season, and let's be honest, he wasn't going to get any first team action anyway. Cenk Tosun ain't good enough, and if they receive a bid for Cenk Tosun, they may be tempted to sell. So they're desperate for a striker. So anyone that we've got, we're going to add another £20 million to. So the Zirkzee rumour in itself makes sense, is that he comes in for, a couple of £1 million loan fee, and then there's an obligation to buy for 10 million maybe. But I just don't know at the moment. I'm going to stick it in possibly because I honestly couldn't say one way or another, to be perfectly honest with you. I'd like to think Everton are in the market for another centre forward, at least somebody to come in on loan, even if it's just till the end of the season to fill to fill a space whilst Moise Keane's at PSG, and then in the summer we can decide what we're doing. If Moise Keane wants to leave, then we could sell him and we can reinvest that money back into the team, in maybe somebody that can play up front but can also play on the wings, a utility player if you like, somebody like a Ben Godfrey but who can play up that other end of the pitch, and by that I mean Ben Godfrey can play left back, right back, centre back, maybe somebody that can play centre forward, right wing, left wing. So I'd like to think that Everton would be in the market for bringing in a striker just on loan for 6 months and seeing where it goes, just so we've got that extra bit of cover for if Dom gets injured and Cenk Tosun, can't play through either injury or fitness reasons. But again, with Marcel Brands coming out and saying we're not actively looking for somebody in the transfer market, but if an opportunity arises, that sort of makes me think, well, has the opportunity of Joshua Zirkzee arrived? Have Bayern Munich said, look, we've got this lad here, we know he's played, he's had some form of connection with Everton before, we want to send him on loan for the rest of the season, will you take him? Maybe that's the type of opportunity, because ultimately, look, even after what Marcel Brands said the other day, and I think we all accept what Marcel Brands has said about, not actively looking to bring players in, I think if we do sign somebody, we're just going to get, well, yeah, the opportunity arose, so we brought him in because we know he improves the squad. It's not going to be like, oh my God, you said we weren't signing anybody, now we've signed somebody. It's like, well, yeah, the opportunity come, we could do with a player in that position, so we brought him in on loan. I don't think we'll sign anybody for a transfer fee. It will be a loan. But again, I really don't know about this one. The playing time quote from, well, the feeling that he wants a lot more playing time than he's currently getting makes me think that maybe Everton aren't the greatest suited club. He'll get a lot more game time at Everton than he would at Bayern Munich, but it's whether he wants that or whether he wants to be starting week in, week out, because he's not going to get that at Everton. Certainly not straight away, certainly not until he comes in and proves himself as a goal scorer in the Premier League, which is very tough to do. And as well, you've got to ultimately look at it and think, is this just his agent throwing Everton's name in the hat for the sake of saying, well, yeah, basically, let's just throw Parma's name in the hat because they're interested, and then we'll pick a couple of Premier League clubs just so it ramps the bid up from Parma. Maybe his agent sat there and being in talks with Parma or somebody else to bring him in on loan, and then, that said club have said, right, okay, we don't want to pay 10 million in the summer, or we don't want to pay a loan fee, and the agent's gone, right, okay, I'll just say that Everton are interested, and I'll just say that, I'll just say that Arsenal are interested or something, and then that may pumped out of the negotiations up, because we know agents do that. That's not something that's completely against the realm of possibility. We know agents do that. And I sort of sit in between whether I think there's a possibility and whether I think it's just that, basically agent talk and us getting thrown in the hat to ramp the price up. It is interesting that, according to Alan Myers, Everton's sources have come out and completely dismissed being interested in the player. But again, we've seen that situation before as well. So I suppose we'll just have to see where this one ends up. I've put possibly because, again, I'm humming and hawing about it. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't sign him. I wouldn't be surprised if we do sign him. Would I like us to bring him in? If it's on a 6-month loan deal and there's not a big financial loss and ultimately it's only a couple of £1 million fee, then what harm does it have bringing him into the squad? It gives us more of an option. It gives us, maybe if he impresses, it maybe gives Dominic Calvert-Lewin a couple of games to rest. But ultimately, again, like I said, we'll just have to wait and see on this one. So yeah, they are the rumours regarding Joshua Zirkzee. And the next thing I want to talk about isn't a transfer rumour. It's not something that we're going to rate because it's a transfer that's already happened. I just want to talk about this for a couple of minutes, and that's Ellis Simms' move to Blackpool. Now, I was originally going to discuss this in the weekly news roundup tomorrow, and I will discuss it briefly in the weekly news roundup tomorrow, of course. But I've got quite a lot of news to talk about in terms of, a couple of partnerships that Everton have made, a couple of fixture changes as well. So I thought, you know what, we'll talk about it today. If you didn't know, Ellis Simms has moved to Blackpool on loan for the remainder of the 2020-2021 season. The League One side pretty much come out of nowhere, to be perfectly honest with you. I didn't see this one coming whatsoever. And the young Everton striker has signed for them. I think he scored over 50 goals in 80 appearances for Everton's under-18s and under-23s, and he has been in fine goal-scoring form this season as well. He's on 8 goals, I believe. I think it's a brilliant move. I think, just like I thought the same with the Jared Branthwaite move to Blackburn, I think this is an absolutely fantastic move. Ultimately, let's be perfectly honest with ourselves, and I know there was a lot of Evertonians calling for Ellis Sims to be involved in games very recently because he had the odd appearance on the bench, and obviously Cenk Tosun had shown that he wasn't brilliant. Dominic Calvert-Lewin had picked up a knock, and I know there was a lot of Blues that wanted to see Ellis Sims be given that chance, but let's be honest with ourselves, he was never going to be given first team football at Everton, certainly not at the moment. He needed to go out on loan ultimately to improve. Playing in the under-23s in the Premier League too, yes, he'll do well. Yes, he'll score goals, but it's not really helping his development. It's not really helping him progress. And like I said, he wasn't going to get in the first team or even, many opportunities coming off the bench. So I think a loan move was absolutely right for Ellis Sims. It was essential. Going to a club in Blackpool, which isn't too far away from home, is great as well, of course, because it means he's only 30-40 minutes, up the motorway, and it's very easily accessible to get back to Liverpool, of course. And ultimately, he's going to a League One club where if he gets the opportunities, if he gets the game time, it'll be really, really interesting to see how he does. He's a fantastic goal scorer, Ellis Sims. He's an absolutely fantastic goal scorer, but he's not ready for the Premier League. I know a lot of Evertonians want to believe he's ready, but he's not ready for the Premier League. He's still got a lot to learn, but the good thing about Ellis Sims is his ceiling is very, 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 very high, and he's showing every potential that he will improve on those things that he needs to improve on, and that he will learn those lessons that he needs to learn. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how he does at a League One club. I just hope he gets the opportunities. I'd have rather have seen him go to a League 2 club with the guarantee that he's going to play week in, week out than go to a League 1 club and not really get the game time. But the hope is that he does get the game time. Ultimately, the hope is that Blackpool do put that trust in him and do start him week in, week out and do allow him to show his talent, because I think he could absolutely tear up League 1 if given the opportunity to, and it'll be fantastic to see. But ultimately, I think it's the right decision for, again, all parties. Same as with the Bernard situation. I think it's brilliant for Everton because the lad's going out and getting experience, and he's going to come back. He's 19 years old now, so this really was the point in his career where he needed to go out on loan, or he needed to be involved in the first team. Okay, he might have trained with the first team and been on the bench a couple of times, but let's be honest, he wasn't really involved in the first team, so a loan was absolutely imperative for him this season. He couldn't have just played another season in the under-23. So absolutely fantastic news. It'll be brilliant to see how Ellis Sims does in League One at Blackpool, and I'll definitely be looking out for their fixtures as well. Very tough, competitive league, so it's going to be very, very interesting. And ultimately, it's a taste of first team football, and I know modern day football is very different than it was a long time ago, and I'm sure Premier League 2 and the academy teams still feel like, well, they are professional footballers, but I mean, the match day regimes are still very similar to those of a Premier League footballer. But it's it's going to be difficult for Ellis Sims to go down to League One. There's a lot of travelling involved, there's a lot of game time, there's a lot of playing time, so it'll be really, really interesting to see how he does, and I think it's a fantastic move for him and the football club as well. So absolutely brilliant. Anyway, that's going to round up this Talking Rubbish transfer show. Talked about a couple of transfers that have been floating about, transfer rumours that have been floating about recently. There isn't much else to talk about, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Nothing else has really happened. We will, of course, have the game preview to our FA Cup fixture against Sheffield Wednesday out tomorrow. That'll be out around about 5 o'clock-ish tomorrow, so look out for that one. And then we will, of course, have the weekly news roundup. We're going to talk a little bit about the Bernard situation in the weekly news roundup as well, but we won't go into as much detail as we have today. There's also a lot of other Everton news, so don't think I won't watch the news video because I've watched this one. There's a lot of other Everton news that has happened this week that we haven't mentioned, so that'll be included in the weekly news roundup tomorrow. Massive thanks for watching. If you have enjoyed this one, please do hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you are new as well. Really do appreciate all of the support recently. Cheers for watching, and we'll see you soon on the Mighty Blues.